Welcome to another episode of Conduct Detrimental. I am Dan Lust, joined by my fellow Dan Wallach. We have one topic this week. It is the Washington Commanders. It is the updates. It's the Attorney General's now investigating. It's the Commanders' response. It's Jason Friedman's response to their response. It's really the next level of this. So, Dan, we have a guest on, Washington Post, Nicki Jhabvala. She's going to help us break it down. Before I give it to you, let me remind our listeners this podcast is sponsored by Themis Bar Review. They are the top bar prep company in the entire galaxy. We're going to get into Nicki and her reporting over at the Washington Post. They're the best paper in all of D.C., maybe the country. I don't know if we can say that, but they're certainly up there. Themis Bar Review, no question. Best bar prep company in the entire nation. Dan, let me turn it over to you for your thoughts before we hand it over to Nicki on this and the latest developments in the Commander saga.
Yeah, I've been a big fan of Nicki's work going back several years. You know, she was a colleague of mine at The Athletic covering the Denver Broncos, and she really got into the weeds on some of the lawsuits surrounding the franchise, the right of first refusal, the trust battle, that was playing out in the California probate court. So she's gotten a crash course on legal education. I mean, it's almost mandatory if you're going to be an NFL writer, especially these days. You have to know a little something about the law because eventually you're going to be covering some court stuff and some legal proceedings. And I think maybe more so than any other writer in the National Football League, she's been deeply immersed in the court battles, congressional stuff, Department of Justice, Federal Trade Commission. When does she ever have time to write about the games? But she's one of my favorite writers covering the National Football League. And now she's working at one of the, preeminent newspapers in the United States, the Washington Post. So I'm really excited about having her on to talk about the latest controversy that's threatening to ensnaring the Washington Commanders and Dan Snyder, who is God's gift to sports law.
So before we hand it over to Nicki, we were talking to Nicki offline. Nicki has two golden doodles. Dan, we all know that you have a mini poodle. I have a mini golden doodle. We're all dog people here. So we're going to talk a little bit about Dan Snyder, I'm sure. But Underdog Fantasy, our sponsor, their logo is Bandit the dog. We were given clearance to talk about dogs. Just trust us a little bit. We tell you the best bar prep company, Themis Bar Review, the top betting site. Underdog Fantasy, we are in the thick of the NBA playoffs. Baseball is in full action. Check out Underdog Fantasy. Use our promo code CONDUCT. NHL playoffs almost upon us, so certainly check that out. I guess we can move over to Nicki. The one conclusion that I draw from our investigation, our research into Dan Snyder, we're all dog people here. I respect dog people. I respect cat people. I respect really all pet owners. If you don't have any pets and you hate animals, probably not going to be a fan of yours. Dare I say, Dan Snyder might be one of those people. He might be, Dan.
It's possible he has an animal, but if I had to bet, I would say he's animal-less, because that would require compassion, kindness, warmth, love.
Keep going, Dan. Keep going.
All the human attributes that make a person a good person. Yet, if you read his response to this, referral to the Federal Trade Commission, he's filled with a lot of hate towards Jason Friedman, calling him, among other things, a serial liar. A liar, once a liar, always a liar. I think I'm repeating myself. We'll hear it on the interview later.
If you read between the lines, he called him liar pants on fire.
So when you cross Dan Snyder simply by accusing him of misconduct, he gets personal. He gets down and dirty. And this is one of the, just most amazing letters written by a lawyer I've ever come across in my life. Reed Smith in Washington, D.C., by the way, the same lawyer who represented A-Rod in his attempt to overturn his 162-game suspension. So we're going to really dive into the sort of the merits as well as the details of the accusations surrounding these alleged financial improprieties. So, buckle up. We're going to be in for a really interesting conversation with the woman and the reporter who broke the story initially about these alleged financial improprieties. So, Dan, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Anything Snyder related is a topic that I love talking about.
Nicki Jhabvala, NFL reporter over at the Washington Post, is our guest. And with that said, let us kick it over to Nicki Jhabvala. Nicki, welcome to Conduct Detrimental. How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We're good. We thought it best to have you on. The Post has really been at the center of this story and the Washington Commander story naturally for a number of years. So you can't really tell the Washington Redskins / Commanders story without the Post. And the story dates back to the Beth Wilkinson investigation, which started in July of 2020. It goes all the way through the John Gruden emails And now it goes to Mr. Jason Friedman, who's now fighting Dan Snyder and the team. So we wanted to have you on. Obviously, we've been covering this story early and often, but the Post has really been at the center of it. So we thought it best to have you on to tell the story. So I guess first and foremost, 30,000 foot level. Can you kind of give our listeners kind of an overview of where we are today and how this story has kind of changed over the last week or so?
Man, it's changed quite a bit. I feel like every day I'm covering a different part of the federal government, just being on this beat. So over the past week or so, and we really started to hear about this multiple weeks ago, about these allegations of financial malfeasance, financial improprieties. And most of it stems from these allegations from Jason Friedman, who's a former VP for the team for 24 years. And he alleges that the team was basically carrying two sets of books, one in which they underreported the revenue that they would share with the league, and another that was obviously accurate and would share with Dan Snyder, the owner. So basically, the oversight committee that has been investigating the team for its toxic workplace and the NFL's handling of that situation expanded its scope to include these allegations of financial malfeasance. And they turned over their findings, these documents, emails, the transcript from Jason Friedman and others to the FTC to see if it's something they want to pursue. So now we got another government department, agency, administration involved in the matter, and there's throughout it all, there's been just so much back and forth through the media with how many different people are going to release a statement anymore. It's just unbelievable.
The update over the weekend, I don't know if it's necessarily an update, but the attorney generals from the DMV, as they're called, Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, say they're investigating him. And maybe just from another checkpoint on the tree, Washington released their response. And obviously Friedman had a kind of response to that. So I wanted to kind of give it to you. Washington response, I think it was a comprehensive one. I think it's now going to come down to a matter of credibility, who's right and who's wrong. But the way I read it, Washington is really bending over backwards to paint Friedman as this, prototypical disgruntled employee. And they have a very, I'll say it, my term, convenient response to everything that he says in it. And if you read the statement, you can't believe a word that Jason Friedman says. But I'll hand it to you. Can you kind of, walk our listeners through how Washington has tried to provide an explanation to each of these various allegations?
Yeah, so they sent an 18-page letter to the FTC, but it was really 102 pages all told with, I think it was like 17 exhibits, 4 declarations from...
That's where the lawyers get you. We throw them in the exhibit.
Yeah, exactly. 4 declarations from former executives. And you're right, it was primarily a character attack, just kind of breaking down the trustworthiness of Jason Friedman, basically painting him, he's a bad guy. You can't believe anything he says, which, can evoke some of the emotional stuff if you're reading it. But as you're parsing through the lines, you kind of have to see it. Are they denying it? Are they disputing it? So a lot of our reporting was centered on the appropriate language to use. Are they outright refuting it, or are they disputing it? And, I remember these conversations with Mark Maskey, even as recently as, last night, just kind of going point by point on, what are they saying here? What exactly are they calling out? But at this point, I feel like largely it has become, he said, she said, there are some documents that each have provided. The team in the recent letter has provided additional documents that they say refute Friedman's allegations, some of which like the
2014 email.
Yeah, the 2014 email, right. And, the Navy Notre Dame game. And
right. For our listeners, it's, again, just to point it out, and then Dan, I know you're jumping to get in, but I read the statement, which obviously they worked a lot on. And, the reporting is out there that they really tried to put everything in a neat box. And then when in doubt, they want to attack the credibility and essentially say, at the end of the day, this guy's a disgruntled employee who wanted his job back as recently as January of, very recently. So how can you believe a word out of this guy's mouth? Which I think it's hard. And this is, the credibility element. It's hard to say that Jason Friedman has zero credibility, right? Because he ran the ticket department for, what was it?
24 years. Yeah. It wasn't just like a 1 year, right. employee or an intern, it was 24 years as,
right.
Yeah.
And these are allegations that speak to diverting ticket revenue, right? And taking security deposits tied to tickets. So, Nicki, I'll give it to you, and then I'll turn over to my friend Dan. From a credibility standpoint, you're a journalist, and part of your job is to try to figure out, who seems to have more veracity in a given standpoint. What are your thoughts on Jason Friedman as a source of information here?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to look at all of it and then kind of do your own digging as you go along. You know, a lot of the things that the team raised in their letter, you also have to ask, all right, is this relevant to the allegations? They can claim what he wants about them, but is this relevant to the allegations that he made about the team and their financial improprieties? And that's, you know, some of which you can question. I think there was a reference of an inappropriate relationship. They don't say the age of this intern, whatever. Is that relevant to the allegations? You know, and there's, I think you also have to look at, you know, the four former executives that they use, like Mitch Gershman. You know, he left in 2015. He was also accused of, you know, sexual harassment and verbal abuse. You have to go beyond this 102-page document, really, to kind of provide some context to who is talking and why they're saying these things and why it's important and which parts you can use. So it's tough. And I feel like if you're coming in cold as a casual reader, I mean, you could be persuaded, you know, in either extreme. And that's what the lawyers are meant to do, you know?
Yeah. Nicki, I've been following you around a little bit through The Athletic. Your portfolio has included the Denver Broncos, right? And now the NFL beat for the Washington Post. Did you ever think that you would need a law degree to decipher all the places where you've been? You've covered stuff at the LA Probate Court, the Denver District Court, Congress, the Federal Trade Commission. I mean, I think you need a
family trust law. Yeah. If you, you know, if you ever need help with, you know, $1 billion trust, I got you. But yeah, I mean, it's like DEA one day, and people forget, like their athletic trainer is still being investigated by the DEA.
Well, you're closer to the corridors of power within the United States government, so you're moving, you know, towards sort of the belly of the beast. But I have a question for you. You know, I've written a lot of demand letters in my lifetime, and I've received my fair share of letters, you know, sort of, you know, trying to tell a story. I've never seen anything as over the top as this, among other things. Mm-hmm. You know, Jason Friedman is depicted as a serial liar, which, okay, if that wasn't bad enough, then they close with, as the saying goes, once a liar, always a liar. And then the cherry on top of the cake, he lied to his mother. Wow.
Yeah, that was
so
the touch, right?
Why do you think the Commanders came in so heavy-handed and made it so personal? If they had the goods and if they had all the records and evidence and declarations under oath to rebut everything he said, why raise the ante and come in very strong like that when there's no soft landing here if they get any of it wrong?
Right. And I think that's a question, honestly, the FTC and a lot of readers have to ask is, why are you going to that direction if you feel you have enough to disprove his allegations? And they did provide some things that, you know, from what we're seeing, and we haven't, you know, seen all of it, obviously, with what they've provided in these documents. That
his mother.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Can you imagine? I feel like the Tony Busby emails and letters have been pretty incredible, too. They're kind of on the same plane there.
And spent a lot of time on this. So.
Yeah. It's just been, I'm like, is this normal? Is this? But
very good point that if you read the letter, either side's presentation, whether it's the House Oversight Committee's letter or the response by the law firm representing the Washington Commanders, if you just read one version of the events, you would come away convinced that either there's something seriously wrong here, or wow, this guy is just a terrible witness with serious credibility problems. So what's the next step in this sequence of events? Is there going to be an investigation by the Federal Trade Commission? Where do you see this thing ultimately headed, both at the league level as well as at the sort of federal agency level?
I feel like I should be asking you guys this question, honestly, because I feel like that's where it feels like there's very little clarity.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, it just, you know, that the DAs could take it over, but I don't. The one DA that has come out somewhat strongly and saying if we feel that there's any evidence that there's been any financial wrongdoing, then we would look into it, is Carl Racine in DC. And then you wonder, what does he have jurisdiction, given that the team is headquartered in Virginia and they play in Maryland? could argue that season ticket holders are in DC. I don't know.
Has the NFL come out with any statement saying that
they have declined statement to us so far?
I see a lot of declarations in there. I see nothing from an NFL attorney or NFL accountant. I certainly don't see anything from Dan Snyder. What, if anything, could we read into the omission of declarations from non-affiliated persons with the Commanders organization, even though some of these are former employees?
Yeah, I thought the choice of people they included were interesting. Just all team form. It was all from one side, obviously. You got some that you could argue have some character questions, others that weren't there for the full tenure of Jason Friedman. It's an interesting mix, and it raises more questions for me. But I think at some point the league will have to address it. I don't know if they do now. The question for me is, what can the FTC do? Because they don't have criminal enforcement power, right? And I don't know if the recent Supreme Court case limited their ability to get refunds if they feel that they're warranted for these season ticket holders, if it proves true that the team, actually withheld security deposits that need to be refunded. So that's the big question now is, okay, what's next?
Well, since you're, on this journey through the governmental court agency system, I would think it's only natural for you to get an introduction to the U.S. Department of Justice at some point.
Oh, I've already had one. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm trying to think of I feel like the list of government agencies that I haven't talked to in the past couple of years is probably shorter than the one that I've.
Maybe you'll be writing for Politico or, switching to the politics feed in a few years.
This is not what I imagined when I came out of college.
So really quick, speaking about kind of next steps, I think the main one that people are looking at are these attorney generals around the DMV, right? So that's going to take into account allegations of consumer fraud. And that's, at the end of the day, right, we've been on this show explaining, unlike, we talked about, you mentioned Tony Busby and Deshaun Watson, right? Those are allegations of sexual harassment, sexual misconduct that are, without video surveillance, some form of a he said, she said, right? You could say something about, the allegations with Dan Snyder on the team plane with the former employee, right? He said, she said to a certain extent. Financial improprieties are not. They're not he said, she said. They're certainly verifiable and quantifiable. That's why, I think everyone's going to take some stock and look at this commander's response. They have to treat this very seriously, because if the QuickBooks turn up, right, and you do the accounting and there's numbers that are off or there's revenue that's hidden, you can't really talk your way out of this. So, Nicki, I saw a report that was probably 2 months ago at this point. It was right around the Super Bowl. But that I think other owners, some anonymous people were like, we're getting tired of what's going on in Washington. I want to try to, you're kind of on the beat and on the ground in Washington. What is the temperature? If it was at an 8 before, are we at a 10? Like, has this kind of increased the pressure on Snyder from an ownership perspective? Because we can wait all we want for the attorney generals to pop in, but I imagine the NFL can act much quicker than the government can if they wanted to. Yeah.
Here's the thing I always come back to is the owners answer to themselves. Roger Goodell has some power, but I view him more as like a press secretary for the owners. He works for them. If the ownership wants to vote out another owner, it's up to them to do it, and they need 3/4 of them to do it. And so far, they've never done it. Is this enough damage? You'd think when anybody starts to affect their money, that's usually the trigger, which is sad because you would think that they also care about, some of these other allegations that have been made and other people have been affected. But, is this enough? I always come back to, do the other owners, do they fear having the tables turned on them? Do they have things that they've done that maybe they're trying to, they don't want out there publicly. So if they set a precedent by voting out Dan Snyder, will one day the tables be turned on them? And I keep coming back to, I don't think so.
The place I keep getting to my head is that same exact one, because I remember back in the day with Donald Sterling, and I've made this point on the show before, that Cuban had some weird comment that, he's probably buried in the 20th page of Google. But he made a comment during the Donald Sterling saga, similar to what you just said. What if the tables are turned? We don't want to set a precedent. And I'm like, or a precedent of something someone says in the privacy of their own home, which, okay, I get the point. But I hope our other owners are not saying things that Donald Sterling said on tape. I hope they're not worried about that precedent. That should probably be inapplicable. But now we're talking about allegations of cooking the books and underreporting league revenue. Maybe I'm a glass half full guy, but I would think the only way that owners would be concerned about that precedent is if they were doing that themselves. So that's my pause here, right? If this was really an isolated instance, and this was, I've never heard of taking money away from my organization and not reporting it, then you'd think that owners would be up in arms with their pitchforks ready to go. But I'm not getting that sense. I'm not seeing a comment from the NFL. I'm not seeing, other than, and this is me, I don't want to get you in trouble, but the reports out there that Snyder has been kind of shooed away from the team and Tanya's in charge, that wasn't done in a public-facing manner. That was done kind of behind the scenes, and we all found out through some comments by Goodell at the owners' meetings. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's necessarily a question in here, but do you think, like, I mean, we're all here saying, if established, right, this will be the thing to get him to go. But do you feel any more confident today that Snyder, might not have the team, a year from now than you might have done maybe 2 months ago without the financial issues?
I always believe that the money would be the thing that boots him out. If anything boots him out. Is this enough? I mean, first we got to see if these allegations are true, but is it enough? I honestly don't know. I just always believe that it's going to take something incredibly significant. And not to say that this isn't, not to say that the other allegations of pervasive sexual harassment and, bullying in the workplace are, to me, that should matter more than the bottom line, when, especially if you're a multi-billionaire like all these guys are. But, it's like the name change that finally happened when the sponsors put pressure on them and threatened to pull out. So I always figured that'd be the case for this. But I feel like this, if they're true, if it leads to more, that it could be the tip of the iceberg, and, that could be something. But if they're not true, obviously no. But it's just hard to say at this point. I just keep coming back to that fact. Like they could vote him out at any point. And you also have to think about Dan Snyder's history himself. Like he's very litigious. Is there a concern there from the league and other owners? They're all very wealthy themselves and can afford any attorney they want. But do they really want to go down that road? Because as you guys know, once they have hearings, a lot gets out in the public. And do they want to risk that?
Yeah, building off that theme, I was going to ask a question directed to that exact point in trying to understand why Dan Snyder is the Teflon Don of the National Football League.
I like Teflon Dan.
You made a reference to the other owners' fear that at some point the table is going to be turned on them. But more specifically, as it pertains to Snyder's litigious history, do you think the other owners fear what a Dan Snyder with nothing to lose, basically going down and trying to bring everybody else down with them, could potentially do to the other owners? I mean, he's been in that room. He knows pretty much all the business that's discussed in those meetings that are held, and he could really cause harm left unhinged. Is there that element of fear that, in your mind explains why he's still standing?
Possibly. And I think it's if that is a reason, it would in some ways make sense. It's the keep your enemies close type thing. But, I do, it's possible. But I think these next few months will be a really important barometer for his standing among ownership and, just kind of his future as an owner.
Well, I think the House Oversight Committee's role really is worth focusing on, because they possess, as a legislative committee or branch of Congress, they have tremendous, almost unfettered investigative powers, subpoena powers, contempt powers. Mm-hmm. And to me, they seem somewhat schizophrenic in that there's not a singular focus here. First, it's the toxic workplace environment, then the slow drip of documents. But what I haven't seen is getting back to the original issue, the reason why they convened in the first place. Who cares about these financial improprieties? That's not the portfolio, or at least the mission of this committee's work vis-a-vis the Washington Commanders. So why haven't they stayed singularly focused on the workplace environment and provide, I think the goal that they could perform here is to sort of bring transparency to the Beth Wilkinson investigation. And the only way that could happen is by issuing subpoenas, calling witnesses to testify, holding hearings, using their contempt powers to override any assertions of the privilege. Can you sort of provide some texture as to why this oversight committee is seemingly all over the place and not keeping its eye on the ball and having this lengthy delay where the clock could be run out and then we could have a changing in the power from the Democrats to the Republicans. Why are they taking such a long time? Are they only trying to score media points, or is there a real focus here? Yeah. Sorry for I'm a law professor, so I ask compound questions. Answer whichever ones you're most comfortable answering, but I want to focus on the committee.
Yeah, and I think in their statement that they put out in response to the team's lengthy letter yesterday, that they say they want to get back to that main focus, which is why they turned this over to the FTC and said, here, you take what we found, you mull it over, decide if you want to do anything. But no, I think that's a fair point. And again, I do think midterm elections, you do have to wonder about that. I mean, anybody that says politics and sports don't mix, oh my gosh, don't even start with me after all this. But, I do think that could play a role in this. How much are they trying to squeeze out of this before it turns over? The other part of it is I think they came across these allegations and, I don't think you can sit on them, but I don't know. You would know more about that than me.
Are we ever going to have a showdown over this document production?
Yeah.
Because this third party that's the custodian of all these documents to which Dan Snyder has asserted a privilege under this joint defense doctrine. Are we ever going to have a showdown over the production of these documents and having a hearing where this is the whole point of this, to kind of learn what really happened behind the scenes? And I suspect that the House Oversight Committee is really not that much closer to finding out what happened than they were, 5 months ago. What, if anything, have you heard about where the committee's work is going to go from here?
Yeah, I mean, there hasn't been much that I've heard directly yet. I still think they're still going through the process and using their subpoena power and bringing people in. I think they're still trying to uncover as much as they can and talk to people. And I think it's going to kind of be a slow trickle of news coming out. But, now you got, multiple government administrations involved. So it could go in any sort of direction. I mean, you could have parallel tracks where you got something from the FTC and something from the Oversight Committee going at the same time, which would not be fun. I don't really want that to happen. Actually, now that I think about it, let's avoid that.
What's interesting, and you guys both hit on it, the undertone to this, and we are not a, sports and politics of law podcast. We just cover sports law. We leave out the middle part, but the undertone to some of the reporting has been, the right yelling at the left, why are you guys doing this? It's a waste of resources. So, not that I'm telling people to pay attention to the midterm elections, which you should. It's our country, all that fun stuff. But, there's a chance with the change in control that the investigation will just kind of go up in a puff of smoke. People will be like, what happened? And sometimes political reasons decide things. And it's unfortunate, but, it's a reality that.
Yeah. I mean, I think if anybody listened to the panel in February, which was, I believe it was the day after they announced their name change, when Tiffany Johnston, shared her allegations of, sexual harassment. You could hear the differences very clearly, among members of Congress from different parties. So there's a very stark line there. So definitely that, it's not a political issue at heart, but the politics surrounding it could have a significant impact over these next few months.
Nicki, it was fantastic to have you, and our listeners should continue to follow all the post coverage. We've been trying to highlight as much as we can, but you and Mark have done a fantastic job on this on this latest round. So, can't wait to see what happens next. Imagine we'll have something within the week. Just seems like we're at that pace at this point.
Mark Maskey and Liz Clark they're the brilliant ones. I help out wherever I can, but they're really amazing. So
we'd love to have you back. We really would, because this would be one of the great off-season stories with more, details and revelations to come out. I think you hit it on the head. We're just at the beginning. So please come back to join us on Conduct Detrimental. And I'm only sorry you didn't get a chance to cover Deflategate too. Or maybe you did. I don't know.
I didn't. I would love to get them all in. I mean, I'm a law/football writer, apparently.
You have to be these days.
Don't tell anybody I didn't go to law school.
We will not, except for the people that are listening to this podcast. Nicki, our pleasure to have you on, and keep fighting the good fight over there.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
It was great meeting you. Thank you for joining us.
So that was Nicki Jhabvala. She is on Twitter at Nicki, Nicki, Jhabvala, Jhabvala. Nicki has been basically everywhere. She's been with The Athletic, The Denver Post, The New York Times, The Sports Illustrated. And as we mentioned, she's the current NFL reporter at The Washington Post. So certainly Nicki hit the story from all angles. Dan, what do you think?
Well, I came away loving she coined a new expression to describe NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, describing him as the press secretary for NFL owners. I don't know if that's the first time that's ever been said, but I got a kick out of that because in a way, or in a sense, there's a lot of truth. He's out there as the front person to kind of, just shield and defend against all the accusations. And they put him out there to take the heat off the other owners. This is an enduring story. Now, I've been waiting for a long time for the kind of story that's going to involve, not only the NFL as a workplace, but also focus on Dan Snyder's conduct and the Commanders' conduct. I mean, there have been accusations and allegations around him and this team for a long time, but now we're in the halls of Congress and before a federal agency, and this is pretty much uncharted territory when it comes to sort of the legal implications of what's going on around Snyder and the Washington Commanders. So this is uncharted territory. We don't know where it's going to go. We're at the very beginning of this investigative process concerning the financial improprieties, Dan. But I thought she was great. And I think what she highlighted was you can't really read or make any assumptions when you read a 18-page document. And that's true of either presentation, because in a vacuum, if you read what the Commanders lawyer wrote, and then you read what the congressional committee wrote, you would tend to believe their version of the event. But at this point, all it is a referral for a possible investigation. And the FTC is empowered to conduct their own investigation without according any undue weight or necessarily believing at face value any self-interested witnesses are going to say. So the truth will eventually come out. But the National Football League has been silent in this all along. And I think they're going to be a very key player in trying to sort of get to the bottom of what's true, what's not true about these alleged financial improprieties, because if anyone would know, it would be the league.
I guess let's stop here for 1 second. The point that you and I spoke about offline, which I think is an interesting one. The firm that has been representing Jason Friedman is the same firm that represented the, how many former female employees. So this is now a firm, Katz, Marshall, and Banks. And we've heard from Lisa Banks and Deborah Katz, really the main two attorneys associated with this case. So I saw an article, and maybe about a year or two ago. Remember, a lot of these claims are sexual harassment, toxic workplace, but dating back several years. So we had on this podcast once upon a time 2 former female employees that are actually clients of the firm. It's Megan Imbert and Anna Nunez, who had, I think, allegations, and I don't want to say anything, but I think older allegations. One where you think the statute of limitations might have run. And I think there was a comment by this law firm that some of the statute of limitations had run, but they want to represent their interests from a kind of holistic perspective, right? That's at least my read on it. So if you read the Washington Commanders statement, I thought it was interesting. They are basically calling out, right, the KMB law firm. They actually refer to them by name a couple times. So it's an interesting business perspective, Dan. Let's say some of these cases, right, maybe not all of them, maybe some of them are still potential viable claims. But the statute of limitations has run on some of them. You have a firm that's just representing the entire interest. So I think, we're obviously a podcast that talks about legal stories, but the law firms involved. I think it's just an interesting decision from a business standpoint to be taking on all these cases, maybe not making money off of all of them, like dollar for dollar, but the amount of publicity that you're getting from this case, the NFL now has to say your name. And if you want to find a law firm that's fighting against the NFL, I think it does speak volumes that they're taking this case and they're not winning some huge $1 million judgment, right? They're fighting the fight every single day. So I just think it's an interesting story that's certainly not getting talked about.
Well, in the area of sexual harassment, there are a number of firms. There's one in particular in New York and another lawyer in Los Angeles, where they're constantly in the news media gathering up, alleged victims and holding press conferences. And there's a method to the madness, because if you put Dan Snyder's head on a spike and you ferret this out and get findings, and he's removed as team owner, I mean, this law firm will have, a lot of business that's generated as a result. It's good advertising. That's not why they're doing it. They have 40 clients. They're spending real lawyer billable hours because these women have a story to tell and they've been victims of alleged sexual harassment and sexual misconduct. Sometimes you take these matters on as a sort of a cause, irrespective of the financial upside associated with it, but they get both. They get to do really important work that changes the conversation and create some social change and change at the team level. And then they get hopefully some recognition from that, and they would deserve it. So I think they're trying to accomplish a noble goal as well as one that's related to their business.
Yeah, I think the point, and you hit it. Sometimes you take a case, not because that case is going to make you money, but because it'll bring you the next case after that, that'll make you money. So, we talk about it I'm sure these cases, if you're a sports fan, right, or if you're someone that's caring about these rights, this is an important case, but at the end of the day, you got to have cases that keep the lights on. So sometimes, though, you take a small case to land another case. So it's an interesting one. Dan, what the point that,
they're a whistleblower law firm. There are always
right.
whistleblowers in corporate America.
Right.
So this case or this, their involvement in this highlights their prominence as a law firm in this very niche area where they're based in Washington, D.C., and it is a tremendous area of the law and one that's not practiced by that many law firms. So simply put, this is something that really showcases their effectiveness as lawyers in this area.
Speaking of Lisa Banks and Deborah Katz, this is a statement that came out. So we spent a lot of time talking about how the Commanders responded to Jason Friedman. They're throwing him under the bus. They're saying he lied to his mom, everything under the sun. They're saying he just wants a job back with the team and he was ripped off. So this guy's got an axe to grind. That's the image that Washington's painting. So this is the statement from, on behalf of Jason Friedman, right? This is the ticket employee we're talking about, from his attorneys, Lisa Banks and Deborah Katz. Quote, Mr. Friedman stands by his testimony, which was truthful and based on his experience with the team. And watch this one, right? I'm just going to fast forward a little bit. My client is also prepared to defend himself publicly against these allegations if Mr. Snyder permits him to do so. In the meantime, we will communicate directly with the team about these demonstrably false allegations. So what they've said in a way, you want to do some lawyer translation here, is if you release him from his NDA, don't worry. He'll go singing like a canary left and right. He's not afraid of coming out and speaking truthfully. He's not afraid of you going after him for defamation because, Dan, as you and I both know, right, the truth is an absolute defense. But what Mr. Friedman...
And it will set you free.
The truth will set you free, true. But what I think he is fearful of, if you're just reading that statement, again, where we have to see the actual terms, but I think he's fearful of violating an NDA, right? You're certainly allowed to violate an NDA if you're called by some NDAs, if you're called by a court order, by subpoena. So I imagine there's most NDAs have that type of language in it.
He voluntarily appeared here. This is not pursuant to congressional subpoena. I think it's, he sua sponte came forward with the offer to testify.
Well, then don't you think he's in trouble with his NDA?
Yeah, but
I read that.
Let's have Lisa Banks on the podcast and get to the bottom of something.
I have some connections into her. We did have some of her former clientele on the podcast. She did clear their appearance on our show, so we're certainly on the radar.
Let's just get right to it and bring Lisa on to answer some of these questions. And by the way, you're reading from a press statement or press release that was put out by the Banks law firm. Implicit, or if you read the last line, there's also an implicit threat of a defamation lawsuit against the Washington Commanders. They said, we will speak to you more directly about these allegations, meaning that not only did they falsely accuse, in their mind, Jason Friedman, but they're also, if you read between the lines and the footnote in the text, the Commanders are accusing the law firm of orchestrating this campaign to smear Dan Snyder. That in and of itself is defamation. So you have two layers of defamation here potentially. So this is a really exciting legal controversy that's unfolding right before our very eyes, with like new tentacles and tributaries that are just growing from what started as a workplace investigation.
Okay, so I think this is a good transition point. Dan, you and I were on Bench Points. That's our new rebranded show. It was Opening Arguments. We switched over to Bench Points. I think is a little more sporty. We like the name. And Dan, you and I were back on. We talked about Snyder, and we talked about the chance the team would be sold in addition, to Deshaun Watson. Talked about Brian Flores, but I think this is a good time to drop the audio. And Dan, when you and I go on, it's appointment viewing. So we'll put it on. I think it was really good. Dan, no spoilers, but it was a good match. Dan, anything to add before we want to preview our battle, or you just want to let them hear the audio?
No, I think the rubber match is going to be, the major sports law event of the year.
Well, hold on. When you say rubber match, that implies that you won, Dan. Way to spoil it for everyone.
That implies that you won the first round. And
that was
who knows? Who knows? I mean, I guess let the viewers and listeners find out. But no, this is really everything surrounding the Washington Commanders is reaching a boiling point right now. The different investigations, the Gruden case, which will yield some discovery. This is for an NFL offseason. This is really like the sort of the high watermark for talking about the Commanders and Dan Snyder.
Okay, so let us turn it over to episode 7 of Bench Points with Conlon, featuring yours truly, head-to-head against Dan Wallach.
Counsel approached the bench.
You play to win. And I don't care if you don't have any wins. You go play to win. When you start telling me it doesn't matter, then retire. Get out. Because it matters.
Pulls off three-pointer. Bang! Bang! It's good! Wins the game at the buzzer!
You can't handle the truth.
What's going on, folks? Welcome back. I'm Conlon Farrell, as always, with a new name this week, Bench Points, and we are going to bring you the same top-level content on this week's show. We go back to episode 1, who I had on originally the co-founders of the Top Notch Sports Law podcast, Dan Wallach and Dan Lust, join me on tonight's episode of Bench Points. Guys, how are we doing? Great to be on with you.
Hey, the rebranding. We're here for it.
Rebranding, but nothing else going to change. Same format, same squeaky hammer. Listen, I'm still the judge, the jury, the executioner. All right. And we are going to get through these topics all on the gridiron tonight, fellas. And so let's get started. Let's go right away. We know how it is. 45 seconds on the clock. We'll each be given a chance to issue an opening remark and then a rebuttal, and then we'll decide. So this time we're going to start in Washington, D.C., with Dan Snyder, the owner, or the current owner, I should say, of the Washington Commanders down there. So, Dan Snyder, a year from today, is he still the owner of the Commanders? Now, at the Bench Points Sportsbook and Casino, where I am the odds maker and I will take all your action, I'm going to put on my action-taking glasses here, and I'm going to set the line, folks. Gentlemen, at minus 180. I feel like I'm reading, the slips at the end of an episode of Survivor right there. But we'll say minus 180. Dan Lust, you start us off tonight on tonight's episode. Why is that a good bet? Tell me if that line needs to be adjusted and, defend yourself. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. So, first of all, bench points, ready to go. Okay. Listen, I'll say this. Minus 180 basically tells you that the public thinks this thing is definitely going to happen. Mm-hmm. For about, a decade plus, Washington fans have been clamoring, we need to have him sell the team. We need to get rid of the team. Listen, I feel confident. I don't feel minus 180 confident. So if I'm operating like conduct detrimental sportsbook, resorts, world, and casino,
okay,
I think we're going with like 350, 400. I think someone would be insane to price at a minus 180. They're not getting any action whatsoever. I think it's the most likely it's ever been today. But saying it's minus 180 tells you it's like a virtual certainty. And I certainly don't feel that confident. I'd like it to, but I just don't feel that confident today.
Dan Wallach.
I take that line all day long. Are you kidding me? First of all, where there's smoke, there's fire. The walls are closing on Dan Snyder. If it's not the sexual harassment situation, skimming of profits from the owners, more to come out in the John Gruden litigation. When the leagues want somebody gone, they disappear very quickly. With the National Basketball Association, Bruce Levinson and Sterling were both out of there within a matter of a couple of months. Jerry Richardson in the NFL, same thing, quickly. So if there's anything to these allegations, the league will not want this hanging over the goodwill of the NFL for that much longer. It's going to happen fast.
Dan Lust, your 30 counter.
Well, here's the thing, Dan. Listen. Dan Snyder's out here giving Dan's a bad name, so I'm all for him getting booted. But it was about 2 years ago, right, with the sexual harassment, toxic workplace stuff. This is percolating. This is something new, but I would think he would have been kicked out already if he was really going to sleep with the fishes or whatever kind of organized crime analogy you were making. So I think it's likely. I just don't think it's minus 180 likely. If I'm a bettor, right, I'm gravitating toward the casino that has the plus 300, plus 400. I don't think the public thinks it's that virtual certainty. That's it. That's all I'm saying.
Dan Wallach, round us out. Topic 1.
Okay, here's the great equalizer here. Why I think it's going to happen a little bit more quickly. There's another dimension being added to this debate, which is the role that Congress is going to play and the Federal Trade Commission. Congress has the ability to make life extremely complicated for the National Football League by repealing the antitrust exemption, repealing other federal laws, imposing new obligations. Congress and the FTC can do things that the league and the civil litigation process are unable to accomplish. It's going to happen fast.
All right. Fast and furious, just like our segment there on topic number 1, bench points, the rebranding of our new show here. Dan Wallach, though, we're riding with you as he is live on location in the Bench Points Cigar Bar down there on the good soil in our lovely panhandle state of Florida there, Mr. Wallach. Yes, minus 180. I think the last point that stuck with me the most was now Congress's involvement in this whole fiasco can make life on the league extremely difficult. The league's already got a number of issues, and we'll cover them in the subsequent topics here to come. But they've already got another issue. Deshaun Watson, Brian Flores, his lawsuit. This piling on here, minus 180. Dan Snyder, you've seen your last game in the owner's box of the Washington Commanders. All right.
Well, I see how it is. I see how it is, Colin. I'm watching.
Hey,
it.
listen.
Wait a second. There's a trend here that's been developing over the last couple of episodes. I race out to a 1-0 lead, and then you give Lust the last 2 segments, and I lose.
How can you say no to that hair? Well, what do you want me to do again? Hey, come on. Listen, well, don't run out of gas this time. We got 2 more topics coming up here, guys. All right. Dan Wallach defends the line. We hold the line at minus 180 there for Dan Snyder. He's going to get ousted in DC. We stay on the gridiron. As we mentioned, a full football show here on Bench Points, the rebranding. Deshaun Watson, that's been our go-to bread and butter in sports law for the past 6-8 months because the story keeps getting juicier. So now, both sides agreeing, both Tony Busby and Deshaun Watson sides mutually coming to terms with the agreement that they will not conduct a trial on these civil lawsuits until after March 1st of 2023. That moves us to our next question on topic number 2 here on Bench Points. Which season, will Deshaun Watson be suspended for? 2022 or 2023? Dan Wallach, I kick it to you. We'll go here. Because of the trials being pushed back, does that push back a potential suspension for Watson? Go ahead.
I don't think so at all, because I don't think that this matter will ever see the light of day in a courtroom. Deshaun Watson will likely settle this case and these cases and try to get closure as quickly as possible, because from his vantage point and from the Browns' vantage point, it serves no one any good to delay the suspension until the 2023 regular season. Take the hit now. And, by the way, the trial delay has nothing to do, and it does not foreclose the NFL from conducting its own investigation. They're a year into this. There's enough evidence on the table for the NFL to take action in the 2022 regular season. Just take your lumps now. And in the long run, the 2023 season is going to be far more important for the Browns and Deshaun Watson.
Dan Lust, go ahead.
I mean, if you're going to suspend him for the 2022 season, it kind of presupposes that he's going to come to some type of settlement ahead of time. So let's not everyone forget, at the end of October of 2021, Roger Goodell basically said they didn't have enough to put him on the exempt list. So I'm not really sure what has changed other than that he beat the indictment, right? So I certainly think there's a world. I mean, listen to Watson's own words, where he does not intend to settle any of these cases. So that puts you, right? We're not going to have any trials before August. So that would take you into 2023. So I certainly see a world, a possibility where the actual heavy testimony, or it may be a culpable or a civil finding after trial, comes in 2023. So listen, I'm happy to take it. It's a harder argument, Dan, but I'm not afraid of a challenge here. 2023 it is.
Wallach, 30.
Dan, forget about the civil trial. It's never going to take place. The National Football League began its investigation a year and 2 or 3 months ago. They're 15 months into the investigation. If they were to take action against Watson in 2023, it will have meant that they have taken 2+ years to investigate these civil allegations, which is absolutely ridiculous. All parties on the league side want closure here, and the league can conduct its own investigation parallel to any civil proceedings. The league is not foreclosed by the civil schedule. They will take action this year.
Dan Lust, 30.
We spent a lot of time on the show talking about how Watson's base contract for 2022 has this $1 million salary. I also think there's a world here, right, where Goodell goes, you know what? I'm smarter than you. You can't make your base salary $1 million for 2022 and think you can get away with it. I'm Roger Goodell. I'll suspend you in the year where you're making more money. So let's not underestimate the commissioner Goodell here. Not the most popular guy in the world, and I think maybe he's worried that Manfred has surpassed him in terms of hatred. Goodell's going to be like, you know what? I got this. 2023. I'm taking it away from Watson. Dan, I feel, I don't know if I feel very confident, but I feel pretty confident here. I feel pretty confident I'm going to win. I feel pretty confident I'm going to win this point.
Yeah.
Can I move for leave to file a sir reply brief limited to 10 seconds?
No, that's not the rule.
Listen, if I attended any law school classes and understood what that meant, we could possibly have an answer for you. But that's why I have the Bachelor of Arts degree in journalism and not a law degree. So with that said, though, Dan Wallach, you'll be fond of this outcome. Again, a second point has been awarded to Team Wallach. Listen, you make the point, Dan, lost in your counter there, that Roger Goodell thinks he's going to be the big bad wolf and huff and puff and blow Deshaun Watson's $1 million base salary and push it ahead, move his suspension to 2023. But the point that Wallach made earlier was, look, this investigation has already been ongoing. If a 2023 suspension happens, that means this investigation that the NFL took part in lasted over 2.5 years. That is too long of a rain cloud to be hanging over the league itself, Dan Wallach, because it's the way the NFL is looking at it. We have 3 major offseason stories that have already affected the NFL in a negative light. I guarantee you, history shows that we're going to have something else happen before then. Deshaun Watson cannot constantly be something that's hanging over Goodell's head. He has to make a decision. If he does, it's going to be the 2022 season. Oh, and by the way, bench.
Hold on, yeah. Wait, has anyone ever been down 2-0? Am I just like?
I don't think so. So you know what I mean. I wouldn't put this one in the records books that the Lust household. However, on bench points, the rebranding. We take things a little more serious here. All right. We were having fun before. Now with our students and stuff. This is grown man business, boys. So listen, you get swept, there's going to be a punishment that will be announced at the end of the show. So listen, Lance,
hold on. We can't just make up rules on the fly. Like that's not how shows work.
Who are you talking to?
We just can't make up rules.
Who's holding the squeaky gavel here? I think I. So
this is preposterous. I'm just.
How about like professional wrestling?
You're out of order. Yeah.
Hold on. This is a kangaroo court. We're not making up rules on the fly. But that said, this is all hypothetical. I'm not getting swept.
You have to leave Scarsdale or wherever you live.
Dan, don't get swept. Don't get swept. You don't have to worry about it. There you go.
Not getting swept.
By the way, Dan.
Number 3. 2 topics in the books. 2 victories for Mr. Dan Wallach down there in the great Sunshine State of Florida. Gentlemen, we move to our third and final topic here on Bench Points. Brian Flores in the amended lawsuit this week now adds another 3 teams to bring the total to 6. In the initial suit, it was the Dolphins, the New York Giants, and the Denver Broncos. This week, now adding the Houston Texans, along with the Arizona Cardinals and the Tennessee Titans. Joining him in the lawsuit, former Cardinals head coach Steve Wilks and former Titans defensive coordinator Ray Horton. This seems like the floodgates are only beginning to open in this lawsuit. And like I said with Watson, the NFL has its hands full in dealing with a number of scandals this offseason. Dan Walk, you're the first one to high ground. You hold serve here. Total number of teams that will be named as defendants in this Flores lawsuit, over under 15.5. Go ahead, 45.
Colin, it's going to be way under. In the federal court system, you only get so many chances to amend a complaint. They've already made that one amendment, and the addition of all these new teams is unnecessary because the remaining 26 NFL teams are already in effect, defendants to this lawsuit by virtue of being named as John Doe defendants. The reason the other 2 plaintiffs were added was mainly to provide sort of balance for purposes of class certification, to have somebody who's never been a head coach, which is Ray Horton, and then the bridge coach in Steve Wilks. So you needed these 2 additional plaintiffs to provide sort of balance. You're not going to have all these new plaintiffs joining because they're not necessary.
Dan Lust, 45 to you.
Okay. You see this? Glass is coming off here. We're not losing this, guys. Okay. So here's what's happening. Optics. Tennessee Titans felt the need to respond, right, with their own public statement because they felt like they were under the gun. there was no necessarily a need to add the Titans because you actually sued the NFL. You sued all 32 member clubs. But guess what? You did it, and you sent a shockwave through Tennessee. Dan, you and I were quoted in the Tennessean. Okay, I know that story, right? That these allegations are felt within Tennessee. So 15.5. I mean, listen, you can amend the complaint more than one time. You're not barred by one amended complaint. I think there will be more. I think there'll be 2, 3, 4. I don't think we're stopping at 3 plaintiffs here. Class action, right? This is supposed to be an open class action case. I certainly can see this number rising. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Optics, Dan. Optics. Force the teams to respond.
Dan Wallach, 30.
Hey, Dan, if you know anything about class action litigation, all these other unnamed black head coaches are already part of the lawsuit as unnamed class members. The plaintiffs that were added are simply serving in a representative capacity as class representatives. None of these dozens of other unnamed head coaches need to put their names to a complaint because, number one, there could be repercussions. More importantly, they're already adequately represented by the 3 named plaintiffs. No reason at all for them to take that chance. There is enough here for class certification.
Dan Luss, round us out. Save yourself.
Okay.
Already celebrating.
So February, right, we had 3 teams, okay? By April, right, we have another 3 teams. I'm seeing a trend here. I'm seeing this number continue to increase. So regardless, Dan, of the technical requirements of a class action certification, what I'm seeing, Dan, are you lighting up a victory cigar while I'm going? Okay, let's talk about premature
the ghost of Red Auerbach.
Let's relax here, okay? Because, Dan, this is a lawsuit about optics, right? This is a guy that sued during the Super Bowl week. Optics are suing all 32 NFL teams individually named, going after each team, applying the pressure to each team. And amending the caption, it's not a big deal, right? We're talking about substance over form, right? I see this number going up, Dan. Up.
Colin, can I light the victory cigar?
You already did. You already lit it.
He was. And he lit it, but he lit it prematurely. Dan Luss saves his bacon. Because here's where I find Mr. Luss' argument a little more captivating. Listen, Brian Flores took the initial step. He took the step and he said, look, I might never coach again, but this needs to be heard and this needs to be voiced. Steve Wilkes, Ray Horton, joining his side, stepping up and bringing their issues to light and bringing their experiences where they've been given sham interviews and being incentivized to lose. I think the more people that stack their names to this show that the NFL, they're not afraid of potential repercussions they could face or job security, stuff like that. The more people on this list putting their name to paper, I think is a better representation for Mr. Flores' lawsuit. So Dan Luss, the point is yours. You save yourself from the sweep. That would have been embarrassing on bench points, the rebranding debut, Dan Luss getting swept out the door. We would have had to do something 2-1. Wallach is the victor. Well, guys, this wraps bench points. The rebranding, but with Dan Squared, you guys, gentlemen, were both fantastic as always. Conduct Detrimental, your leader in sports law coverage. Next week, we'll be back, guys. As always, I'm Colin Farrell.
So Dan spoiled it. Dan did take me down. I had to save off the sweep, but it's 1-1. We'll return at some point. We'll do the grudge match, but shout out to Conlon. He's doing a great job with the show. I guess we should mention Bench Points has a separate podcast feed if you want to subscribe there. But as always, we put the video up, so people can see the numbers. The show is getting a lot of views, so we're certainly happy to see that thing grow. If you do want to pop on the show, certainly drop us a line. We're happy to have you on. Okay, Dan, anything to add?
Oh, that was one of my favorite episodes. She was terrific. Nikki was awesome. And Bench Points, I think, got off to a really strong rebrand. I would say strong start, but it's more of a rebrand than a start. Fortunately, we found a name that I think really captures the essence and has a sort of a turn on a phrase of legal reference. So it's just the ideal rebrand for a great sports law debate show. So that was a lot of fun to do this with you.
All good, Dan. So I guess we can sign this off. I have so much fun talking every week. Con Detrimental is our social handle. ConductDetrimental.com. We're always looking for new writers. And guess we can put this one in the books. For Dan, myself, the Conduct Detrimental family. We will see you next time on another episode of Conduct Detrimental.